here, including Zergo Bellstriker.
Yeah, 4 Zergo Bellstriker and 4 Lightning Berserker in the deck, as well as 3 Dragon Fodder that really powers up cards like Foundry Street Denizen. This red deck wins got even lower to the ground if that was possible.
Yep. A lot of new options. Ross playing green-red aggro. He also has new options. He's going to start off with the Elvish Mystic. The big card in this deck is Thunderbreak Region. He's got 4 copies of those, but he also has 3 copies of Surek the Hunt Caller as we are underway here in round number 9. Wild Slash will take care of the Elvish Mystic. Merriam with a Mountain and another Mystic. So killing the elves, something that we typically see red decks do, but Merriam has the backup.
One thing you have to say which is impressive about Ross, if you look at his career over the last 2 years, he has always been very good in week 1 of standard formats. If you go all the way back, he first played the White Weenie Spear of Heliod deck. Then if you saw Doomwake Giant, as soon as Journey into Nyx came out, he top-aided and opened the first week with that as well. You see him doing it with Green Red Aggro, which, if you look at the numbers from yesterday, this was the breakout deck. Ross Merriam 4-0 with it. Matt Costa 4-0 with it. Seth Manfield also 4-0 with the same deck. Manfield's is a little more red. Ross and Costa worked together on this build, which actually, as you mentioned, has a fair amount of green sources in it. Boon Satyr and Surek the Hunt Caller.
Yeah, you throw Arrow Wiles in there as well, which is currently in play. It's a different deck. And we've seen green red decks over the past. Think of Chris Van Meter last year playing green red monsters with Pelucranos and Stormbreath Dragon. Ross does have Stormbreath Dragon here in his deck, but he does not have Pelucranos, opting for Surek the Hunt Caller. You've got a Goblin Rabblemaster here from Braverman. That's just a one of in his deck. The Goblin, of course, going to run into the air.
Yeah, so you may call it maybe not an entirely new archetype, but one thing is he's playing more than 10 cards out of Dragons of Tarkir. 3 Surek, 4 Thunderbreak Regent, 2 Draconic Roar. He has a Roast in his deck, more when you go to the sideboard, not including also, in Sam Manfield's version, he's even going so far as to play some of the Dragonlands. I don't believe that Merriam and Costa are playing that. They're instead going for double green cards.
Yeah, no Haven of the Spirit Dragon here for Ross, as he's going to analyze his hand and the board, figure out a way to work his way through this Goblin Rabblemaster. But there is a lot of new content here in this deck. Again, 4 Thunderbreak Regions, 3 Surek the Hunt Callers, 1 main deck Rose, 2 copies of Draconic Roar. So it's clearly working out for him, and we'll see if his deck can beat Mono Red, especially Mono Red does kill his Mana Accelerants. Now, a second copy of Air of the Wilds. Ross looking to play a little defense now.
Yeah, well, he's kind of forced into the defensive role because he doesn't have a removal spell for Goblin Rabblemaster, and that's a card that really demands a kill spell. That said, this isn't a terrible type of matchup for Ross. With cards like his Surek or Thunderbreak Regent, those are really good tools against a red deck if he can get them in play. The fact that Michael spent his first 2 turns using Wild Slashes has got to be a win for Ross, even though he lost his mana creatures.
Well, Braverman will analyze the board now. 4 Mountains in play and a Rabblemaster. That'll be churning out goblins, though they'll be running into things that they prefer not to run into. Here is 2 mana. That'll be a Lightning Strike to get Air of the Wilds out of the way. See if he has another removal spell here.
Yeah, so the removal in Braverman's deck, it's very similar to the kind of ones that we saw even 2 weeks ago in Dallas. Lightning Strike, Wild Slash, Stoke the Flames. Really nothing other than that. I suppose Goblin Heel Cutter as well. He's playing 3 of those. That card actually should be pretty good in this matchup.
A Goblin is made, and into the red zone we're going to go. Air of the Wilds probably looking to trade with the Rabblemaster. And it will. 1 damage will come through. Merriam's going to go down to 19. We'll see what the follow-up is here for Braverman as he taps 2 mana. Looks like it might be an Eidolon of the Great Revel, and it is. That's a passing of the turn.
One thing you might not be able to tell from this is that Michael Braverman has gotten his red deck wins deck so close to the ground that he's actually only playing 1 Goblin Rabblemaster in the main deck, which just happened to show up this game. Certainly one of the more powerful red cards, but he's gone down to 21 lands, and in order to do that, really had to make some cuts.
Wooded Foothills here for Ross. He's down to 18. He'll search up a forest. This is where things get a little scary for Braverman because the big creatures are tough for him to beat. So if he does have a Thunderbreak Regent, if there's a Surek the Hunt Caller, though Surek does have 4 toughness. I suppose Thunderbreak does as well, but there's a little bit of a payment if you try to kill that with a Stoke the Flames. That's how he's going to try to stabilize, is with the Thunderbreak Regent.
Yeah, so from Braverman's side, the Thunderbreak Regent is, the ability is not as much what Braverman's concerned about. It's just the 4/4 body and the fact that it's difficult for him to swing to. You really hit the nail there. 4 toughness means he can Stoke the Flames to get through it, but he really is going to have either Stoke the Flames or one of his Goblin Heel Cutters if he wants to attack through these kind of creatures.
Yeah, Heel Cutter would be great on this turn. He's tapping 3 mana very quickly here. Not sure if it is a Heel Cutter. It's just a copy of Hordling Outburst. The Eidolon will be dealing Braverman damage this turn. So he'll get 3 goblins, but have to pay 2 to do it.
Yeah, Eidolon is actually quite a liability here. I would imagine we'll see those get boarded out after the next game. It's It's going to hurt Braverman more than it's going to hurt Ross in these games.
Soak the Flames will take care of the Thunderbreak Region. Braverman will have to take 3 to do so, thanks to the Thunderbreak Region's trigger, but 3 damage will now come across, and Braverman is in a pretty commanding position right now.
Yeah, well, Hordling Outburst is one of the key cards on Braverman's side, because when you look at Ross's deck, he's got a lot of big threats to play, and maybe threats in the air, but he doesn't have any sweeper, any way to go wide. So one way that Braverman can continue to push in damage is just to outnumber Ross on the board.
I think of Ross and the Invitational that he did top 8 a couple of years ago, and he did it with a green-red deck, but that green-red deck had access to Bonfire of the Damned, and I bet he wish he had access to that right now, given the board position, because stabilizing here is going to be pretty difficult. Braverman doing a nice job of going wide, and Merriam does a nice job of going big, and going wide is a way to go around going big.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're going to see that right here. Michael does have Ross down to 11, and with 5 creatures in play, he could have lethal in 1 or 2 turns.
Braverman going to take a look at the grip, figure out if he can further things along here. He's got a pretty good board. He's not underneath a ton of pressure, though Goblin Master can catch up pretty quickly here. Also see if the Eidolon plays a role in things on either side of the table. I do agree with you. I think we're going to see Eidolon get boarded out pretty quickly here.
Well, yeah, it's not very live against Ross's deck. Most of his payoff cards are all at 4 mana.
Everybody's coming into the red zone. See how Merriam opts to block here. Their Album Master could jump around of a 1-1, stay alive, or can trade with the Eidolon. I think we're going to see the Elvish Mystic block no matter what. So Merriam's going to work down some of these 1-1s from Hordling Outburst, so he'll have to take 4 points of damage. He's going to go to 7.
If Braverman's swinging out here, he either doesn't have, he either has what should be a lethal kind of attack, or he's just swinging because the tank is empty.
Yeah. Well, he's got to take some more damage to play those 2 spells, but that's fine, because he's just getting a big board and play. Lightning Berserker was the follow-up. That's his last card.
Yeah, you see Braverman's life total here of 10. It's because he's cast 3 spells into his own Eidolon, and he's targeted a Thunderbreak region.
Yep.
So I guess Ross has dealt 1 damage with his own attacks. 9 of it Braverman's really has hit himself for.
Now, Ross is trying to probably figure out a way. Is there a way I can catch Michael by surprise with some sort of haste threat? Maybe a card like Boon Satyr. That's the big trick at this point. Now, Lightning Berserker is going to cause some real issues here, because now Braverman actually has something to do with his mana no matter what happens.
Right. And that's where Lightning Berserker I really like in the deck. It lets you still play enough lands to curve out, but not really get punished for having extra lands in play. Mono Red Aggro is a deck that, when it sees its 5th land, there's kind of an audible sigh from the pilot. It feels a lot like not drawing a card, but Lightning Berserker solves some of that problem for the deck.
Goblin token in from the Rabble Master. Ross may swing out here. He will. Perhaps trying to get Braverman to make a mistake. And I like this play a lot, because I think that Ross is pretty far behind. If Ross just plays a defensive role, it gives Braverman more draw steps. Michael is probably able to overcome that even if he doesn't draw any more cards for the game. So I think you have to maybe take an aggressive stance here and maybe just try to work Braverman into a mistake, potentially.
Yeah, and I agree here, because Ross can't really take too much of a defensive stance. Those 2 tokens have to attack due to Goblin Rabble Master. There's only 1 attacker Ross gets a choice of. And looking at Braverman's board, it's not as though Braverman is going to not attack.
Yeah. Well, Braverman will untap. He'll draw a card. Pretty healthy board here with 4 Goblin tokens, Eidolon, the Great Ruffle, and a Lightning Berserker. Again, Ross just hoping that Michael makes some sort of a mistake.
After 5th land there for Braverman. You have to give Braverman some credit with the styling he's doing with his lands here.
Do I?
Oh, I'm a fan. I like it.
They're all different.
Oh, they're different in all sorts of ways. You have different sets, different card face, different borders.
There's removal spell, Draconic Roar. And Ross is going to concede the game. He was hoping that Braverman would forget his Eidolon trigger. That is not the case. And so Merriam will have to concede the game. Michael Braverman is going to win game number 1 here over Ross Merriam. Mono Red Aggro up a game over Green Red Aggro. As we are going to move on to the sideboards here, and we will start with Ross. You mentioned more roasts than the board. He has 2 more copies of those. 3 Destructive Revelries, 3 Xenagos the Reveler. Anissa World Waker, 3 Wild Slashers, and 3 Hornet Nests. He's got some nice tools for this matchup.
He has some excellent tools for the Mono Red matchup. So If you look at the kind of cards that are very strong against green-red aggro, Hordling Outburst comes to the top of the chart, and that certainly, the double Hordling Outburst won the game there for Michael Braverman. So Ross doesn't have an actual sweeper in his sideboard, but what he does have is something that's still good against Hordling Outburst, and this is his 3 copies of Hornet Nest. It's very difficult for the mono-red deck to get through that kind of card without paying at least 1, if not more, cards of its own.
I think Hornet's Nest is a disaster. I think the 6 cards that Ross has in his board here, 3 Hornet Nest, 3 Wild Slash, this is exactly where you want to be. Roast is fine. I'm not unhappy with Roast, but those 6 cards are going to be really tough for Braverman to get through.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably would want to get away from Roast, especially if he knows, I don't know if he knows Braverman's list, but as he knows that Braverman cuts down on cards like Goblin Rabblemaster, it disincentivizes Roast, well, even more in this sort of matchup.
What does Braverman have? You have that in front of you.
Well, if you want to talk about cards like Roast, that's not unreasonable to play on Braverman's side. If he knows that Ross is on a card like Surak, he certainly can get rid of that. There's some problems as there are some flyers, and you can't actually roast the flyers in Ross's deck. But what Braverman needs is he needs ways to get through these big creatures. Ross will try to stabilize by making a pair of 5/5s. So Roast, not terrible there. Also, there's a 1 copy of Scouring Sands in Michael Braverman's deck.
Okay.
That could be, I mean, that could get rid of some mana creatures, maybe slow Ross down. He is on Rattleclaw Mystics as well as Elvish Mystics.
True.
So there's some chance to do that. Outside of that, I think Braverman is more on his main deck strategy. The other tools he has, like Outpost Siege, Arc Lightning, are possibly decent here, but his strategy of just going small is probably one he wants to stick to.
Both these players do have Open Series top 8s. They have wins. They have invitational top 8s as well. But Ross Merriam, he got the opportunity to play in the Players' Championship last year. He wants to head back that way. Now, to do that, you're going to have to make the top 8 and win this tournament. So we talk about what's first place. Well, that's $10,000. That's 35 Open Series points. That's your likeness on a card. That's also a ticket to the Players' Championship. You can see the rest of the prizes here. That's what the players are playing for.
Yeah, huge prizes for the Invitational this weekend, and especially for Ross Merriam, there's this, and those Open Series points can't be undervalued. He comes in at 5th place overall on the leaderboard, and that's for Season 1. Now remember, in Season 2, you're gonna have players like Jim Davis not eligible anymore. Ross, I know, talking to him, is really planning to, if he doesn't win this weekend, make a go at that Season 2 points championship.
Season 2 a little bit shorter. He wants to be part of the Players' Championship. Jim Davis, he's qualified. Brad Nelson, he's your defending champion. December 19th and the 20th, we'll have 16 competitors battling it out for $50,000. One of the players is going to qualify here this weekend for winning our Season 1 Invitational. As we work our way through 8 rounds today and then some elimination rounds tomorrow, we're going to add another face to that picture. Don't know who it's going to be, though it could be one of these 2 players. They're off to the best starts this weekend. Braverman currently up a game, looking to get this match over with. Merriam, well, he wants to play a 3rd game for obvious reasons.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that we might actually see Braverman do out of his sideboard is he has a couple copies of Hall of Triumph in his sideboard.
Okay.
If he expects a card like Arc Lightning out of Ross's deck, which I think is a reasonable board card for Ross to have, Hall of Triumph is a great sideboard against it. Now, as it turns out, Ross is on the Hornet Nest plan instead of Arc Lightning, so it's not actually strong here, but I wouldn't be surprised if Braverman has brought it in at least for the 2nd game.
I do like the Hornet Nest and the Wild Slash plan. You actually can take a look in Merriam's deck list. He actually has 2 Arc Lightnings scratched out.
Okay, right.
He thought about playing some this weekend and he opted against it. So you won't find any of those. You will find an Elvish Mystic to start, and we'll see a Wild Slash take it down again as we had Ross's way.
Yeah, and this rings a lot like Game 1. Braverman, if Ross is able to make a 4-drop on turn 3, it's a very difficult game for Braverman to win. He doesn't have that many ways to falter through a blocker outside of his Goblin Heel Cutters. He doesn't have too much large number removal, so those cards can be a problem when they happen early.
Air the Wilds here from Merriam. We head back Braverman's way. Both these players, of course, undefeated in the tournament, which means they were undefeated in Standard. They both went 4-0 with these archetypes. Keep in mind, no more buys in our invitationals. We do buys in our regular Open Series events, but no longer our invitationals, as here is a Lightning Berserker. So both these players had to earn it through the Standard portion, and they certainly did. So if you're looking for new decks to play with Dragon's Dark here, these are certainly options, as here's a Rugged Highlands. Merriam going to gain a life. He's up to 21. Yeah. There's a Rattleclaw Mystic.
With 36 players going undefeated at the end of our Standard portion, you should figure that there should be 2 to 3 8-0 decks at the end of this.
Yeah. Merriam may be considering an attack here. And he will... maybe. Nope. Little defense. Roll assessment, of course, key when you're playing against mono red if you can afford to play defense or if you're supposed to try to out-aggro them.
Right, and I think what we'll see Ross do in the situation is really just continue to play creatures and not attack until he has an overwhelming board. Sometimes red decks have good finisher cards, which can punish you for just playing creatures and not attacking any of them. But Braverman's deck is not one of them. He's really seeking to get ahead on tempo, which so far Ross has stopped him from doing.
Braverman might be coming into the red zone here with his Lightning Berserker. And he will. We'll also take a look at his hand. He's at a healthy 21. And he's going to offer up the trade. So here's a pump with the Berserker. And it looks like Ross just has some real interest in saying, okay, let's trade some resources until I can get to my big stuff. The longer he can make the game go, I feel like things are better for him because his big creatures are so hard for Michael to beat.
If Ross can trade cards early on in the game, once Ross gets to his larger cards, Michael's not going to be able to continue trading with them.
Zergo Bell Striker is the play post combat for Braverman. Merriam does have his Rattleclaw Mystic. There's a 5th mana source, so perhaps it's Stormbreath Dragon time. It is. To the skies, Merriam will go. Now he'll get a little more aggressive. Gonna come in here for 4 points of damage.
So Ross getting ahead here. Braverman does look like he has a copy of Roast in his hand, so that's not going to be particularly helpful against Stormbreath Dragon. He does have Goblin Heel Cutter as well, so he can be behind in this race to a point and actually still be ahead.
Yeah, you know, Roast unfortunately can't shoot down the flyers, as here comes the Bell Striker, but it can take care of any of the other big ground creatures that Merriam may have. And it looks like Braverman, well, we'll see if he's going to continue to go the wide route here.
He does have a copy of Hordeling Outburst, and that's the card that really won him game 1. I think he has been caught by some of the legend rule here with a second copy of Zergo Bell Striker in his hand.
There's Hordeling Outburst, 3 goblins on the way. Ross is really hoping that Braverman doesn't tap those 3 goblins in that mountain at this point to shoot down that Stormbreath Dragon, but I do not think that's going to be the case. As if he could, I think you'd want to do it right now. All you can do is pass the turn back. We head back Ross's way. He'll take a draw step. He's going to come in the air yet again.
Now we'll see, maybe Braverman does have the Stoke. Yeah, there's a chance if Braverman has the Stoke because he has cards like Goblin Heel Cutter. He may want to actually just race and not go at the dragon. It's scary, but not impossible.
Well, some things have changed now. Because now here's a Thunderbreak region. Ross is looking to close this game out very, very fast. Thunderbreak region has been really impressive.
This card has certainly been impressive. It has been a great addition to the green-red aggro decks.
4/4 flyer for 4. If you kill it, of course you're going to be taking 3 damage. We saw in a match yesterday where Corey McDuffie had to potentially double lightning strike it. Well, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, and that's why I think where it's really powerful is you need to kill it in one spell to have it be reasonable to get rid of this card.
Roast will take care of Rattleclaw Mystic. Rattleclaw Mystic, not a dragon.
And here's the best part. This Goblin Heel Cutter, if you Heel Cut Thunderbreak region, that is 3 damage.
Oof.
It's the spell or an ability an opponent controls.
Yep,
so.
Ross already knows right away. He says, yep, you're taking 3. You're right, my creature can't block, but you're taking 3.
Well, 3 is okay. 3 is not 4, so potentially this is okay if you're Michael Braverman.
Yeah?
Ross has 8 in the air. Braverman would be at 9.
Can Ross make a goblin token? He can. That should be Xaxes.
That should be, there we go, and that should be 9. It's one of the few ways.
Yep, there's
that
Draconic Core, too.
There's 3 more from
Yeah.
Draconic Core.
Well, that's going to get things done there. Ross Merriam's going to win game number 2 here against Michael Braverman. Green Red Aggro and Mono Red are going to go to a 3rd one here. And we have seen this over the course of Magic's history where, you know, sometimes all you got to do is fly over a red deck.
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, Ross did a great job of counter racing, you know, just really trading some of the early plays. And to a sense, Braverman played into that. Braverman traded Wild Slash with Elvish Mystic early on, but Ross prevented enough damage early in the game that he was able to get a couple of his flyers through.
It's release weekend. Cut me some slack, says Ross.
Okay, I think he's referring to the fact that he didn't get the 3 off the Thunderbreak region.
I think I have a feeling you're correct.
So now, to be fair, I'm going to give him more slack than that. I am certainly someone who's guilty of, once I find a winning line, I just stop looking. So if you're in Ross's situation, your opponent has tapped out for this heel cutter. He swings with heel cutter. You look at his board. Your opponent's tapped out. His creatures are all tapped. You look at your hand with this Draconic Roar and Rabblemaster, and you say, okay, I have 12 points. I mean, at that point, all right, no more looking, no more, just ignore board triggers, miss everything. I have him dead.
Yeah, nothing else matters. This game's over.
Right.
We have seen that before.
So was it the most elegant win? No, he could have saved the Draconic Roar and not played it. But did it still win? Yep, there's still a 1 next to Ross's name.
A win's a win's a win's a win as these players do shuffle up and get ready for game number 3. How do we feel about things for Braverman on the play here for game 3?
Well, on the play, I certainly like it more. I mean, he's a deck with, he's red deck wins. He wants to be on the play as much as he can here. That said, he can get out ahead with something like, if he has a card like Zergo Bellstriker and Wild Slash in his opening hand, he can have the freedom now, this time, to have the Bellstriker in play and then Wild Slash an Elvish Mystic, as opposed to having to do it in the opposite order.
Yeah, we have seen every game that Braverman has had the answer to an Elvish Mystic, which is actually pretty important because, as you mentioned, Ross's ability to accelerate into a 4-mana spell on turn 3 is very dangerous for Braverman. So if he's able to play a Surak or a Thunderbreak Regent ahead of schedule, makes things very difficult for Michael. Michael being on the play here is certainly a big deal, but again, Ross does have tools to play defense in Wild Slash and Hornet Nest now that he is on the draw. Might see him board in the roasts on the draw as well, just to stabilize things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tricky because Roast doesn't have many great targets. So if you look at the cards that Michael has for creatures, it's Zergo Bellstriker, Lightning Berserker, and Foundry Street Denizen. They all cost 1, so you don't really want to pay 2 mana to roast a 1-mana creature. Michael's big creatures are Eidolon of the Great Revel, which I assume is not in the deck anymore, and Goblin Heel Cutter, which is often going to be dashed. There's a 1-of Rabblemaster that I think is a great roast target for Ross, but outside of that, he may just want to do what he's been doing the previous games and just ramp into threats of his own and use them as blockers.
We're going to find out. These players do shuffle up. These are our 2 undefeated players here. One of them will walk out of this match at 9-0 on top of the standings and in great position to top 8 this Invitational. We've seen players, however, get off to great starts like Brian Braun-Duin. I think of his start where he started either 10 or 11-0 at our Season 1 Invitational last year, and then the House of Cards came crumbling down. So even though one of these players is going to be 9-0, it's no guarantee to top 8. It's just a great position to do so.
And you mentioned that with Brian Braun-Duin, has got to be, over the last 2 years, the player with the best day 1 perform record at Invitationals. Just seems to be at 8-0 and 7-1 more often than not.
Braverman will be on the play this game. Going to take a look at his opening hand. Looks like Ross is mulliganing very quickly. Did not like what he saw, so Braverman's going to keep. Merriam's going to look for 6 cards. Again, Ross does have some very, very nice tools available to him in his sideboard. I think he's going to make his deck a lot lower to the ground, you have to imagine, since he's going to be on the draw here, and Wild Slash and Hornet Nest can play a huge role. We haven't seen Hornet Nest yet, but Hornet Nest is very good in this sort of matchup.
Well, there's not a good way for Braverman to get through it. His best answer to it might be to Wild Slash it, and that's saying a lot because that's not a particularly good answer.
That's a win for Ross Merriam. You are very happy if that's what takes place. Hornet Nest picking up a little bit in the sideboards too this weekend. We have seen, when we look at green decks, a couple copies of those in the sideboard.
Yeah, and it's really for matchups like this.
I think it's at its best against a mono red deck. Because as you mentioned, there's just really no great way. You know, you can heel cutter past it, but outside of that, there's really no efficient way to get this thing off the table.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, when you play, you'd like to swing a 2-1 into it. I think it's even better against decks like Braverman's when you look at the fact that he has cards like Hordling Outburst, like Foundry Street Denizen, which in theory, you could swinging a 2-1 into it's bad. Swinging a 1-1 into it is just awful.
Yeah.
If you're going to make Hornets, you'd hope to at least kill the Hornet's Nest.
Merriam will take a look at 6 cards. Has he done better? You have to imagine he's looking for some of those sideboard cards that we've mentioned. His deck can have a bit of an identity crisis too, because he's going a little bit lower. Again, Wild Slash, Hornet Nest, Elvish Mystic, Heir of the Wilds, Radical Mystic, but his deck can cough up a hand with Stormbreath Dragons and Thunderbreak Regions, which is not what he's looking for on the draw. Braverman going to start with the Foundry Denizen. Merriam with a good land to start. It's a temple. It's also both colors of mana, but Braverman can deal a lot of damage here quickly with the Foundry Denizen.
Well, when you look at the decks in this matchup, Braverman's hands are going to largely look the same. I mean, Mono Red aggro is a deck with a lot of redundancy, so maybe it's that some hands have Founder Street Denizens, some have Zergo Bell Strikers, but they more or less all will do the same thing. On Ross's side, the difference between his good cards and bad cards are really pronounced. Cards like Rattleclaw Mystic or Boon Satyr or Rabble Master or Crater's Claws are weak in the matchup, whereas then you get to things like Hornet Nest or Surrak, which are just incredible in the matchup.
I was going to say Ross is really happy that Braverman had nothing to do on turn number 2 outside of Lightning Strike and Elvish Mystic. But now here's a Rabble Master, which brought a Goblin along with it, which means that the Denizen triggered twice. Merriam does not have a second land. This is a Hordling Outburst, and this might be over pretty quick.
It's going to be a huge Founder Street Denizen. This is a lot of damage. What I believe has happened here, so Ross has, like I talked before about how he has some really strong cards and really weak ones. If on the draw, he saw something like a Temple, an Elvish Mystic, and had a Hornet Nest in his hand, that's one of his highest payoff cards. It's definitely worth keeping the one-lander for. However, you see here, there is the risk every time you keep a one-lander that the games will look like this.
Yep.
And that's how it's played out.
That does
Ross.
it very, very, very quickly. Michael Braverman going to win this match over Ross Merriam. Mono-red aggro will take care of green-red aggro. Merriam had to keep a one-lander with the Temple and Elvish Mystic. Maybe a Hornet's Nest in there as well. Did not draw any more lands. And mono-red, if you stumble and fumble, it'll end the game very quickly.
It's one of the real strengths